XAnalysts. Empowering analysts, transforming markets.
Rachel, good to connect with you. What a turn of events, what a start of the year. I'm sure you are busy somewhere in the world and keeping a track of the markets. Tell me where you are and tell me what are you reading, what are you thinking about what's happening on the US and the Venezuela side.
Yeah, Mukesh, it's such a pleasure to be with you and to try to unpack these fast-moving developments with you. Today, I'm in Philadelphia. I'm at a big gathering of economists. It happens every year, the first weekend of January.
So, Rachel, you're in Philadelphia. What's your quick take on the evolving situation? Is this done, or will this get this? There is a chance to something spiral out or get messy.
It definitely could get messy. Maduro's out, but we don't know what the new government will look like.
Okay.
And it
what
could
happens
be
on
quite
Monday?
Complicated.
Okay. What happens on Monday? Oil price, market reacts which way?
I think it's down a little bit, right? Reverses some of the upside we've seen recently, and there'll be some optimism.
And what's the quick take on, does it make U.S. attempt to resolve Ukraine-Russia crisis any easier or more difficult?
I don't think it makes. I think it's neutral. That what clearly there's a connection, right? Resolving this might undermine the shadow fleet, and that could undermine Russia. And any additional barrels of oil and weaker prices might hurt Russia just as it does other energy producers. But Putin has shown himself pretty impervious to some pressure. So the ball's still in his court, I think.
What happens with Canada? Because Canada and Venezuela produce very heavy crude oil of similar qualities. Now that you have access to Venezuela, US will not care about Canada?
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily great for Canada when the U.S. cares about it, right?
Okay.
But that's another story. Right now we see, Canada's exporting about 4 times as much oil to the U.S. as Venezuela is. That's already a pretty sizable market share. Some of the parts of the U.S. that most rely on Canadian crude, the pipeline structure wouldn't work for them to use to use Venezuelan oil. So I think it's a medium-term challenge, as any additional fuel supply coming online is. But ultimately for Canada, the bigger challenge is outside of the energy sector, and it's also the domestic challenge of building more pipelines to have more optionality in where they can export.
No, you said it right, because US reversed all the pipelines going from the Gulf Coast above to the mid-con refineries. You can't just reverse them back again by pumping. So I guess Canada will stay important. China will probably stay very important. So very interesting developing story. US is after the Venezuelan oil. And if the entire proven world reserves of Venezuelan crude goes to the US economy, it can get trillions of dollars of boost. So I know a lot of armchair analysis is happening. So I want to ask you at the beginning, what do you think is the reason other than the oil from a geopolitics angle?
Yeah, so other than the oil, I think Venezuela has been a major source of illicit migration to the US, and that has been a major driver of the Trump administration. Venezuela's, there's a lot of talk about Venezuela as a source of drugs and illicit drug smuggling. There's definitely a lot of that in Central America and even South America, but there's very little evidence in my mind that Venezuela is a major player. But I do think this migration story is an important one for the Trump administration, and that is part and parcel of why Trump administration officials like Marco Rubio have really fixated on these issues. Now, it's also linked to concerns about the persistent dictatorship in Cuba and the dictatorship in Venezuela. I think the energy piece is part of trying to get a bigger coalition to support this, but ultimately, I think this broader question of the US trying to be more active in the hemisphere to reduce China's role in the hemisphere, to kick, if the Iranians and Russians have roles, to kick them out. I mean, Russia's a more complicated case, as we've talked about in the past. Some days the US likes the Russians, some days Trump is mad at Putin. Yeah. It goes back and forth. But there's a variety of factors here. I would say that the oil is one of what Trump sees as a big upside of this regime change.
Hey.
XAnalysts. Empowering analysts, transforming markets.